Hello and welcome to the future of healthcare cybersecurity. My name is Beau Woods, and I'll be taking you through some of my thoughts on the future of healthcare, as well as the implications for security, protecting patient safety, as well as protecting patient data. Um, for a little bit of background, I started my career in security at a hospital, working as a security analyst on both clinical systems, that is, nursing stations, electronic medical record systems, and others, as well as medical devices. Around 2013, I helped form an initiative called I Am The Cavalry in order to help better protect things like medical devices, cars, airplanes, industrial control systems, and other things. We say where bits and bytes meet flesh and blood, that we want to help preserve the trust that we have in the world around us by improving and enhancing trustworthiness. I'm also on the board of the Biohacking Village, one of the organizers. I started the device lab in 2017, 2018, and it's been a model for bringing together the healthcare community to look at the issues that we face today as well as in the future. Um, I'm also a cyber safety innovation fellow with a think tank in DC called the Atlantic Council, nonpartisan nonprofit that looks at issues of global security and stability, economic prosperity, and other issues. And I spent a year with the Food and Drug Administration as an entrepreneur in residence, helping them to understand how healthcare is going to be shifting and changing, and building out some new pathways to market for things like software as a medical device, apps that are independent of hardware, that are entirely software based, but that need the same type of rigor and analysis as a traditional medical device. So I'm going to quickly recap where I think we are and give a little bit of detail there so that everybody has the same framing. I'm going to look at where we're going, both in terms of the promise and the peril. And then what do we do about it? How do we ensure that we take a path where we're helping people more than putting them at risk from some type of security issue, security threat? So, as many people will be familiar, this is a gentleman named Jay Radcliffe. And Jay is a security researcher and also a diabetic. In 2010, 2011, he was doing research on his own insulin pump that he was at the time using. And as he'll tell the story, he noticed that there were some issues with just normal use where it caused him some issues, and even without an adversary present, he felt like there were safety issues with the device in the way that it was configured and used in some of the default settings. So he said, if an accident can cause things that may put my life at risk, what could an adversary do? What could someone who's trained or dedicated to doing harm do if they got a hold of this device? And so he went through a series of experiments where he tried to demonstrate that adversaries could, in fact, dump the entire bolus into someone. The bolus is the entire dose of insulin that's stored in the device. And to be able to dump it into somebody all at once would cause a severe medical condition that could put someone into a coma or even kill them. So as he found, an adversary would be able to do something like that. So he took his results and went to the manufacturer, and the manufacturer said, everything is fine here, don't worry about it. Jay, of course, being a security researcher, said, I don't feel that everything is fine. And being a diabetic patient, said, I need to help other people who may be in the same position, but who aren't aware. So he took the stage in Black Hat in 2010, and again, I believe in 2012, to talk about the device and some of the security implications that could have true patient safety issues. At the time, there wasn't a lot of guidance from the Food and Drug Administration, the regulator of medical devices. There wasn't a lot of traction in industry to do something different. There wasn't a lot of demand among patients, among healthcare providers to change things. This is another gentleman that several people in the audience may know or know of. Billy Rios is a security researcher, and he also has looked at medical devices. The particular device that he's pulling apart right there is an infusion pump. This is one of the most common devices in a healthcare environment, and it's kind of like a digital IV. So when you go into the hospital and they need to give you some fluids or some type of medicine, oftentimes they'll hook you up to one of these things that will give a very precise amount of dosage, and that will allow the caregivers to monitor remotely how much has gone in, what the effects are, and some other telemetry, so that patients can be safer, so that you can reduce cost of care delivery and increase quality as well as consistency. Billy found in tearing this device apart that actually there was a direct pathway from a network interface that these devices had through to the clinical side of the device that would allow an adversary to give too much or too little of a drug to cause an overdose or an underdose. In some cases, an underdose can be just as bad or worse than an overdose. When Billy reported this to the medical device maker and to the FDA, he said, "I'll give you a year to take care of it, to fix it, to make sure that it's not a problem anymore." Unfortunately, before the year was up, someone else independently discovered this issue and immediately went public with it. So now all of this research is out there, and the medical device maker, the FDA, had to kind of scramble in order to jump on this and make sure that they protected patients and got accurate, timely information out to healthcare providers. And this led the FDA to issue two separate safety letters. Safety letters are effectively akin to a forced recall of devices. When the FDA sent these out, it was the first ever issues of recalls in medical devices for cybersecurity issues. And not only that, they did it before there was evidence of patient harm. So this was a very controversial step at the time, and a big departure from a lot of the established thinking in healthcare and medical communities, that you had to show that patients had been affected in order to issue a recall. So the FDA took this step in 2015. That set the standard or the high water mark for what the FDA was going to do and for what industry should expect from issues like this, security issues, even when no patient harm had come. Now, a couple of years after that, we all probably remember Wannacry, the ransomware, hit the National Health Service, and it knocked out something like 40% of all National Health Service facilities, that's hospitals. And it did so for a period between a day and a week for most of them. And they were just down, they were offline. Some of them because they were hit with ransomware, some of them proactively were taken offline to avoid getting hit with ransomware, which could have taken even longer to fix. Now that's pretty severe, pretty significant for a major, developed nation to have 40% of its healthcare facilities taken offline due to a security issue. That is, as far as I know, unprecedented, and I don't think we've seen anything that's on that same scale to the public health system since. Now, also in 2017, literally less than a month after Wannacry hit, I helped run some of the first clinical simulations of what happens when a patient is actually impacted by some type of a security issue, security incident. We ran 3 scenarios that are kind of like, if you think about a flight simulator where pilots go in to train for unusual conditions, doctors have the same thing. So they'll go into these scenarios where everyone in the room, the patient will be an actor, all the nursing staff and the facilitators will have a script, and there'll be computer controlled diagnostic systems causing the right beeps and blips and statistics to flash on their screens, just like it would be in a real emergency. Only the doctors are completely unaware of the situation. So we ran 3 of these simulations, and you're looking at the after effect or the aftermath of the final simulation, where we effectively simulated what would happen if an adversary caused a pacemaker with an implanted cardiac device, a high side device that gives you a shock to bring you back to life. If an adversary was able to trigger one of those about every 60 seconds to go off by changing the firmware. And what ended up happening is that the doctor went through all the right steps, all the things they had been trained to do in medical school in order to avoid or prevent malfunctions in these implanted devices. And that didn't work. So what the doctor ended up having to do is snipping the wires, going to the pacemaker, going to the ICD, and then put external, essentially an external pacemaker on the patient to keep their heart beating at the right rhythm, because the pacemaker was solving an underlying issue, which was that the patient's heart wasn't beating fast enough. And these were eye-opening. And what we discovered, what we learned by going through these simulations, is that we often hear no one has ever died from a hacked medical device. But what we really learned is that doctors don't really look for hacking or for some type of adversarial activity in cases where patients have an adverse reaction to care treatment. Secondly, investigators like the biomed departments aren't trained for what to look for. And if they have to send devices back to the manufacturer wipes them out, or there's just a whole set of issues why these things aren't found. And then finally, in a lot of cases, the data doesn't even exist. There is no forensically sound evidence capture within devices to be able to tell investigators that something might have happened. So realistically, we wouldn't know if someone had ever died from a hacked medical device or from any kind of cybersecurity issue like what happened in Wannacry. Also in 2017, the Department of Health and Human Services put out the results of a year-long task force report. And what the task force concluded is that healthcare cybersecurity is in critical condition. And this is a pretty severe indictment of the state of security across the healthcare ecosystem in all forms and all aspects. And this document is available. You can go and download it and take a look. This is a graphic from the very first page of that document. And you can read through and see some of the root causes. Why is this the case? It's not enough to just say that this is a problem. We have to know why there is a problem and then be able to take some steps to fix it. And the HHS task force report has quite a few of the recommendations that they think will fix some of these root causes. But to be clear, it's going to be an uphill battle. Now, it's not all negative news. There is some positive news. I mentioned the Biohacking Village device lab. This was an initiative that we set up again in 2017 or 2018 to get started. And here you can see our first year of running it, a handful of the people who came together and were involved. Now, just in this picture, I can show you that there are patients. I can show you that there are people who work at hospitals. I can show you security researchers. I can show you the FDA. I can show you medical device makers. I can show you just passionate advocates for patient safety and patient health. And this was really a great start to something that the following year absolutely blossomed. So this is from 2019, the last in-person Defcon that we held. And we had dozens of people coming together to bring medical devices. We had about 30 medical devices from 10 manufacturers that came together. We had a full-on capture the flag. We had dozens of people coming together to help. It was absolutely amazing to see the outpouring of support for this, and to see how successful we can be when we create a high trust, high collaboration environment for everyone to come together and have candid, open conversations, to talk with each other, to stop thinking about, what is it that you're doing wrong and pointing fingers, and instead say, I want to know what your problems are so that we can together help address them. And what we found time and time again when we run these types of events, whether at DEF CON or at other places, is that not only is there commonality in some of the viewpoints and some of the directions, but that everyone is really passionate and dedicated to making things work, to making things better. And I think that that just is really representative of the way that we will solve these types of problems in the future. Breaking down silos, getting rid of the accusatory or aggressive, confrontational approaches that we've taken in the past, and move towards empathy, understanding, really listening to what other people have to say, understanding what their viewpoints are, and then working together to make change. And this is an initiative that we started with Biohacking Village, I Am The Cavalry, and the Food and Drug Administration as a joint initiative where the Food and Drug Administration themselves, the head of the FDA, called on medical device makers to join with security researchers in events like this, to team up, to work together. And I think that's a sign of what we can do going forward. So where are we going? Well, first, I want to give you a fairly controversial statement, but it's one that I firmly believe. And that is that the single biggest risk to the health of future generations is trust and trustworthiness of healthcare. I believe that this is true, and I believe that this is true because we're going through multiple concurrent revolutions in care delivery. There is so much promise, so many amazing things happening, so much great science coming out today in the biohealth, biotech, biosciences field, both from amateurs, biohackers, DIY science, citizen science people, as well as professional communities, research labs, development facilities, medical device makers, pharmaceutical makers, traditional software makers, folks like Apple, Google, Fitbit. There's so much coming together now today to where I think that healthcare will be absolutely transformed in 15 or 20 years. Let me give you some examples of that. So these are bioreactors. They are facilities and equipment that can generate from some kind of raw materials things like new organs, things like new medicines, or more quickly develop medicines and mass produce them than ever before. And there are groups like DECA, Dean Kamen's group, who invented the Segway and was one of the inventors of the insulin pump that you saw Jay Radcliffe holding earlier, that are literally coming up to production scale on how can you regrow parts of our own body tissues to be able to replace them. Absolutely amazing technology. This is a telemedicine and surgical robot. And in the full clip, it actually cuts a section off of the grape's skin and then sews the skin back on. Absolutely amazing precision. This can allow surgeries to take place even when a specialist isn't available locally. They can do this remotely or have some type of automation assisted surgical process with absolute precision to the degree that is impossible to achieve with human fingers and human hands. This is a great leap forward. And finally, I believe that this set of concurrent revolutions is entirely dependent on artificial intelligence, data, software code, and connectivity. And as most of us know as security researchers or others in the security field, those are some things that we're very concerned about: the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And here in healthcare, I'm most concerned about integrity and availability of these things. So let's look at some of the threats that I see coming. So 2020 has been marked by epidemic, pandemic, the likes of which haven't been seen since 1918 and the flu that took place and swept the globe then. And we've learned a lot about epidemic style risk over the intervening 100 years. In security, we also have concentrated epidemic risk. We are concentrating around a select few types of software packages, software code like Microsoft Windows, like Linux, like Bouncy Castle, like Struts, like some of these other things that we know have severe vulnerabilities. At the same time, we're connecting everything to everything else. So once one domino falls, the rest of them fall, and you have outbreaks that transmit across vulnerable exposed populations at the speed of the network. And we have very, very fast networks. Now, I think that we can do something about that, but we need to think in terms of this concentrated epidemic risk at scale, risk that is harm to people, and risk that comes from a deep supply chain that sometimes is opaque. I believe that distrust in technology will lead the medical practice to retreat to less effective methods of care delivery. I was giving a talk at the Heart Rhythm Society, which is one of the biggest cardiologist conventions every year. And in the Q&A portion, a nurse stood up, and she worked at the Veterans Affairs Hospital. And she said that she had people coming into her offices who desperately needed some type of an implanted cardiac device. And yet they refused those because they were afraid of the risks of it getting hacked. Now, these are former soldiers, and I'm not going to question or doubt whether or not those are legitimate risks, whether they're legitimate concerns, but certainly the people who had been through and seen some extreme adversarial situations know that that bad guys will do things like that. They will try and harm us in any way they can. And if there's a way to do that through medical devices and insecure systems, they will take those. They'll take those opportunities to do so. Secondly, I want to talk about the cool project that is happening where doctors are implanting stimulators in the brain or in the spinal cord to be able to help people walk again, to translate signals across breakages. For instance, if you have a breakage in your spine and your lower back, doctors can implant devices to help you walk again. These particular devices featured in this image are actually used to stimulate the brain to help address things like epilepsy, PTSD, deep traumas. And in one situation, one of the doctors found that patients were changing the dosage so that they could get themselves high. They were literally hacking their own brains to get high. And if just random patients can do that, imagine what adversaries can do. This is an actress. She was in one of the movies that everybody has probably seen on this call. It was the Mockingjay movie, and she played an archer in that movie. She is an archer in real life, and there's some great videos of her. Her name is Angel Giaffra. If you want to go out and look her up, she was born with effectively half of her left arm was not there. So she has a bionic arm. It's a really cool device. She actually charges it with USB. There's a story where she was in an airport and no one would give her a plug so that she could charge up her hand, which is kind of a funny story. But if you think about it, we're increasingly getting to a point where people with prosthetics, they see those as an extension of their own body, even though they're developed and the code is controlled by someone who has manufactured it. And one of the concerns that Angel has is that if she breaks this limb somehow, will she be able to repair it on her own? Or will she have to go to the manufacturer to get it repaired? Will she be able to strengthen it and to push its limits by herself, like going to a digital gym? Or will that be a violation of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act or some other licensing agreement that will forbid her from improving her own body? And these are questions that we're increasingly going to have to face. Now, Stuart Brand is a brilliant guy. He was at the forefront of the computer revolution. He was the forefront of the environmental revolution. And in 1968, he said, "We're as gods and we might as well get good at it." Well, I would challenge that today. And I would say that we're as gods and we must get good at it. It's no longer enough for us to put things out there and hope that they work. Again, going back to this epidemic concentrated risk that I talked about, we're putting devices, systems in the field that have severe issues that are deep as a supply chain and that are connected to everything else. Once one of those dominoes topples, everything else goes really, really quickly. We've got to be better. And again, I'll go back to the single biggest risk to the health of future generations is trust and trustworthiness of healthcare and care delivery. So then what can we do about it? Well, the FDA has already pushed out 2 new guidances. And guidances here doesn't mean optional. It's effectively interpretations of the law as how the FDA is going to regulate healthcare. And these are really solid documents. They've got a third one that's in draft that's should be coming out and becoming final in 2021 or 2022. That's going to change how medical devices are regulated within cybersecurity for the much better future. And so I would encourage you, if you're interested, you can go check these 2 documents out. Secondly, I Am The Cavalry in 2016 launched something we call a Hippocratic Oath for connected medical devices. And just as doctors take a symbolic oath to act in the best interests of their patients, increasingly medical devices are the instruments of care delivery. So those devices should be designed, built, implemented, operated, and maintained with that same symbolic spirit to act in the best interest of patients. And this is available at iamthecavalry.org/oath if you want to go read this. Third, I think we need much better evidence capture. And this is also part of the Hippocratic Oath for connected medical devices and the forthcoming FDA guidance on cybersecurity of medical devices, to be able to capture, learn, study, and do better when it comes to analyzing failures, to knowing what's gone wrong so that we can fix it or adapt and change it in the future. And finally, we need to very seriously look at supply chain security. In particular, there's a requirement in the forthcoming FDA guidance for a software bill of materials. Now, this is some work that I'm the Cavalry and myself and Josh Gorman and many others have been working on for several years. And there's an NTIA working group. NTIA is part of the Department of Commerce that's studying the software bill of materials. And this is led by Dr. Alan Friedman. If you want to get involved in this, if you want to find out more, you can go to ntia.gov and search for the software bill of materials or software component transparency working group. And effectively this says, just like you might have an ingredients list or a bill of materials for physical goods, there can be the same type of thing for software, so that if there are issues deep in the supply chain, we can know about them before adversaries take advantage of them. And with that, I want to thank you all very much for your attention. Thank you all for watching this. If you want to follow up on any of these things, you can get in touch with me at Beau Woods on Twitter. That's at BEAUWOODS. Or come visit iamthecavalry.org or the Biohacking Village, villageb.io. Thank you very much.